Okay, I need you to look at your tongue right now. I am serious. Go get a mirror or open your front camera and just look at it. I will wait. Do you see anything unusual? Smooth patches surrounded by slightly raised borders? Areas where the texture looks different from other areas? Sections that seem to have no bumps at all? If you do, there is a name for that. If you do not, there is a chance you have had it and never noticed. And if you are one of the people who has definitely noticed and spent years feeling quietly weird about it, today is the day someone explains it to you properly. This is geographic tongue, formerly known as benign migratory glossitis, and I have been fascinated by it since I first read about it, because it sits right in the middle of two things I love: things the body does that look alarming but are not dangerous, and things that science has studied for decades and still cannot fully explain. Welcome to Nwanyi. I am Ada. These are my people, Milo and Luma. And today we are going somewhere a little unexpected. We are going to your mouth.
She said that exactly as dramatically as you think she did.
The framing was accurate.
Thank you, Luma. So, geographic tongue. Let us start at the very beginning because I want you to actually understand what you are looking at if you have ever seen this on yourself or someone else. The tongue is covered in these tiny projections called papillae. There are a few different types, but the ones we are talking about today are filiform papillae. They are the smallest ones. They are all over the top of your tongue, and they are what gives the tongue its rough, slightly textured surface. They are not taste buds themselves, but they are part of the system that makes your tongue functional. In geographic tongue, patches of these filiform papillae shed. They just go, and when they do, the area underneath is smooth, red or pink, and clearly differentiated from the surrounding textured areas. Those smooth zones are usually surrounded by a slightly raised, whitish or yellowish border, and the whole pattern looks genuinely like a topographic map, like the surface of a planet, like someone drew continents on your tongue. And the migratory part in the formal name, that refers to the fact that the patches move. Not dramatically, not overnight, but over days and weeks, the patterns shift. Areas that were smooth can grow back. New smooth areas appear elsewhere. It is not static. Your tongue is literally remapping itself.
Okay, I want to pause here because when I first heard this, I needed a moment. Your tongue is remapping itself. That is not metaphor language. That is literal biology. The geography of your mouth changes. I cannot stop thinking about that.
That is why I texted you at midnight.
And I stand by my initial reaction, which was wide awake immediately. Zero regrets.
To be precise about the biological mechanism, in individuals with geographic tongue, the life cycle of filiform papillae is altered. Under normal conditions, these projections are maintained by a balance of cell proliferation and shedding. In affected areas, the shedding rate accelerates, while new growth does not keep pace. The result is denuded or stripped zones on the tongue surface. The borders of these zones are characterized by a slightly hyperplastic, meaning thickened, epithelium. This creates the raised rim that visually outlines each patch. Histologically, the tissue in the affected areas also shows inflammatory cell infiltration, which suggests an immune response is involved in the process. The exact trigger for this inflammatory activity is not established.
What Luma just described is important because it tells us something. The body is not just having a random visual glitch. There's an immune response involved. There is inflammation. The body is doing something intentional, or at least something with intention-shaped behavior. It is just that we do not yet know what intention that is.
The immune system showing up to the tongue party uninvited and refusing to explain why it is there.
That is a non-rigorous description, but it is not inaccurate.
I will take it.
Okay, so who actually gets geographic tongue? Because this is where it starts to get really interesting from a pattern perspective. Estimates vary, but geographic tongue is thought to affect somewhere between 1 and 3% of the general population. Some studies put it as high as 14% in specific populations. It can occur at any age, including in infants and young children, but it tends to be more commonly reported in adults. And here is something that has shown up consistently across research. It appears more frequently in women than in men. That ratio is not massive, but it is consistent enough to be notable. There is also a significant genetic component. It runs in families. If one of your parents has it, your risk is higher. It has been mapped to chromosomes in familial studies, though a single causative gene has not been identified.
The gender thing is interesting to me because, and I want to be careful here because I do not want to oversimplify, but so many conditions that involve the immune system and hormones and stress responses show up differently in women's bodies and get dramatically less research attention as a result. I am not saying that is definitively what is happening here, but I am saying the pattern is familiar.
You are saying the pattern is familiar, and you are right. We are going to come back to that when we talk about the psoriasis connection. But yes, noted.
The heritability evidence is reasonably strong. First-degree relatives of individuals with geographic tongue have a statistically elevated likelihood of developing the condition. However, the mode of inheritance does not follow a simple Mendelian pattern, which suggests multiple genes are involved and environmental factors likely influence expression.
So most people with geographic tongue have it more or less all the time at some low level, but it flares. It gets more visible, more pronounced, and sometimes more symptomatic during certain periods. And the triggers are, in my opinion, very telling. Stress is one of the most consistently reported triggers. When people are going through high-stress periods, geographic tongue flares. Hormonal changes are another big one. Pregnancy, menstruation, hormonal contraception changes, perimenopause. Nutritional deficiencies, particularly B vitamins and zinc, have also been associated with flares. Allergies and certain foods tend to make it worse, especially spicy foods, citrus, tomatoes, acidic things, alcohol, mint.
Okay, the stress one I find deeply relatable, even not having the condition. The idea that your body manifests stress somewhere specific, somewhere visible, and in this case, it is your tongue. Your tongue is your stress diary.
And you would never know unless someone told you what to look for or unless it hurt.
That is actually the thing that got me. Most people have it, and it is painless. They just think their tongue looks weird. They have probably looked at it every day without ever knowing there was a name for what they were seeing.
The stress association is not merely anecdotal. Physiologically, psychological stress triggers the release of cortisol and activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. This affects immune regulation throughout the body, including the oral mucosa. The inflammatory response observed in geographic tongue tissue aligns with the kind of localized immune dysregulation that stress hormones can produce. Similarly, the hormonal association suggests that sex hormones may modulate the behavior of epithelial cells in the tongue, which would explain why geographic tongue flares coincide with known hormonal fluctuation windows. The B vitamin connection is consistent with the role of B vitamins in cellular turnover and epithelial maintenance.
So your body is communicating through your tongue. It is telling you something about your stress levels, about your nutritional state, about your hormones. And most people are walking around receiving that communication and having absolutely no idea. This is the part that when I first read it, made me sit up straight. Because geographic tongue does not exist in isolation. It has documented associations with other conditions, and the most significant one is psoriasis. Psoriasis is a chronic autoimmune skin condition where the immune system mistakenly attacks skin cells, causing them to multiply too fast and build up on the surface. The visual result is patches of thickened, often scaly skin. Sound familiar? The histological patterns in geographic tongue, the immune infiltration, the altered cellular turnover, the patch formation and migration are remarkably similar to what happens in psoriatic plaques. So much so that some researchers have proposed geographic tongue should be considered an oral manifestation of psoriasis.
The idea that your tongue and your skin could be expressing the same underlying process is actually profound to me, because it reframes the condition. It stops being this random weird mouth thing and starts being a possible window into systemic immune behavior.
Exactly. And here is the other thing that matters. Geographic tongue is also more common in people who have other autoimmune or inflammatory conditions. Atopic dermatitis, asthma, certain allergies, reactive arthritis. These associations are not all fully explained, but the pattern of co-occurrence is consistent enough that researchers take it seriously.
The association between geographic tongue and psoriasis is supported by histopathological and genetic data. Both conditions show similar tissue architecture under microscopy, and genome-wide association studies have identified shared chromosomal regions, particularly on chromosome 6, near the human leukocyte antigen complex, which is heavily involved in immune regulation. This suggests a possible shared genetic predisposition. However, it is important to note that geographic tongue frequently occurs in individuals with no psoriasis and no identified autoimmune condition. The relationship is an association, not a causation. Having geographic tongue does not mean you have psoriasis, or will develop it. But the biological similarity is scientifically significant.
And this is where I come back to what Milo said earlier about research attention. If geographic tongue is potentially an oral expression of psoriatic immune behavior, and if it disproportionately affects women, and if it flares with stress and hormonal changes, this seems like something medicine should be very curious about. Not because it is dangerous, it is not, but because it might be a signal, a visible, accessible signal of something happening beneath the surface.
The tongue as diagnostic window. I would watch that documentary.
We basically made it.
This section features composite real-world accounts drawn from documented public testimonials and online health community discussions. Names are not used. These reflect common experiences shared by people living with geographic tongue.
Before Luma gives us the full clinical breakdown and we talk about what you can actually do, I want to take a moment for the human part of this. Because reading the research is one thing, but what is it actually like to live with a condition that looks unusual, that your doctor might never have mentioned, and that has no definitive treatment plan? I want to share some experiences. These are composite accounts drawn from what real people have shared publicly in health forums and communities. The names are not real, but the experiences are.
A 34-year-old woman described noticing the patches in her early 20s and spending years convinced something was wrong. She said she went to 3 different dentists and 2 doctors over the span of a decade, and only one of them knew what it was. The others told her to just watch it. No name, no explanation. She said learning it had a name was genuinely emotional for her. She felt less alone.
That is something that comes up over and over again in these accounts. The relief of having a name. Because when something in your body looks different and no one can tell you what it is, your mind does not default to benign. It defaults to worst case. It defaults to what if this is something serious? And that anxiety itself, which is a trigger, can make the condition worse.
Another person, a man in his 40s, wrote about geographic tongue flaring badly during the most stressful period of his career. He said he did not connect the two until years later when he found an article about stress triggers. His tongue had been keeping a record of what his nervous system was going through, and he had not been reading it.
His tongue had been keeping a record. I wrote that down because that is the thing. The body is always communicating. We are just often not trained to listen.
There were also a lot of parents in these communities. Parents who noticed it in their children and were terrified. Because seeing unusual patches on your child's tongue as a parent is alarming, even if, in retrospect, it is harmless. Those accounts were really moving because the relief when they got a diagnosis was so complete.
I will provide a comprehensive summary of what the clinical literature currently supports regarding geographic tongue. Diagnosis is made visually. There are no blood tests, biopsies, or imaging required to diagnose geographic tongue. A clinician or dentist familiar with the condition can identify it on examination. However, it can occasionally be confused with oral candidiasis, lichen planus, or early leukoplakia, so a proper clinical evaluation is recommended if you are uncertain. The condition is classified as benign, which means it does not progress to cancer and is not a precancerous lesion. There is no association with malignancy. This is important information because the appearance can be alarming, and patients are sometimes unnecessarily frightened by the visual presentation. Symptomatic management is the current standard of care, as there is no treatment that eliminates the condition. For individuals who experience sensitivity or discomfort, options include avoiding identified trigger foods during flares, using over-the-counter anesthetic mouth rinses for temporary relief, ensuring adequate intake of B vitamins and zinc, managing stress through evidence-based interventions, and consulting a physician if there is a suspected association with an underlying inflammatory condition such as psoriasis or atopic dermatitis. For most individuals, geographic tongue requires no intervention at all. It is managed through awareness rather than treatment. Understanding what triggers flares and modifying behavior accordingly is sufficient for the majority of cases. I would add one clinical note. Because geographic tongue is associated with hormonal fluctuation, individuals undergoing significant hormonal changes, including pregnancy, menopause, or changes in hormonal contraception, may notice increased frequency or severity of flares during those periods. This is expected and does not indicate a worsening underlying condition.
I want to highlight something Luma just said that I think often gets lost in clinical summaries. The condition is managed through awareness rather than treatment. That framing matters because it moves the power toward the person living with it. You learn your triggers. You understand your body. You are the one with the most useful information. So here is the practical section. What do you do if you have geographic tongue or think you might? First, get a proper confirmation. Go to a dentist or doctor who can look at it and tell you definitively that is what it is. Not because you need treatment, but because you deserve to know. You deserve the name. Do not let yourself spend years wondering.
Second, Start tracking your flares. Keep a simple note on your phone. When do you notice it more? What have you been eating? How has your stress been? How is your sleep? After a few cycles, you will start to see your own patterns, and that information is genuinely useful.
Third, check your nutrition. B12 deficiency in particular is extremely common and tends to fly under the radar, especially in people who eat limited animal products. Zinc deficiency is also frequently overlooked. Getting a basic panel done to check your levels is worth doing, regardless of the geographic tongue, but it is especially relevant here.
Fourth, do not panic. I know that sounds simple, but it is genuinely important. The visual is alarming. The unknown is alarming, but geographic tongue is benign. It is not going to become something worse. Your tongue just has interesting architecture and the sensitivity to your stress levels and your diet. You can work with that.
Fifth, if you have a personal or family history of psoriasis, atopic dermatitis, or other inflammatory conditions, mention the geographic tongue to your physician, not as a primary concern, but as additional clinical context. The connection may be relevant to a broader conversation about inflammatory management that could benefit your overall care.
And sixth, tell people. Because the accounts I read made it very clear that a huge percentage of people with geographic tongue feel alone with it, feel weird about it, have been dismissed or given no explanation. If you know someone who mentions their tongue looks strange or different, and you now know what to say it. Geographic tongue. Benign migratory glossitis. Look it up. You might give someone years of unnecessary anxiety back. Here is what I take away from geographic tongue and why I wanted to do a full video on it. Not because it is a scary condition, it is not, but because it is an example of something the body does that is visible, that is communicating something, and that most people have never been properly told about. It sits at this intersection of immune behavior, stress response, hormonal influence, and genetic predisposition. And all of those systems are interconnected. The tongue is just where we can see the conversation happening.
For me, the takeaway is about medical knowledge as access. Not everyone gets the same level of explanation from their healthcare providers. A lot of people, particularly women, particularly people of color, walk away from appointments with less information than they came in needing. Content like this matters because knowledge should not be gatekept behind the quality of your particular doctor's communication style.
From a clinical perspective, geographic tongue is well documented but poorly understood. The gap between what we observe and what we can explain is significant. I consider that gap to be an invitation rather than a limitation. The science is not finished.
The science is not finished. I love that. Write that down. Thank you for spending this time with us. Your curiosity is the thing. Soft but sovereign. We will see you next time.